Hey, what's up you guys, and of course welcome to another alternative factuals video. Let me know how this mic sounds. For the most part, this is my shotgun mic that I use when I make short films and projects that are outside of this channel, so let me know how you're feeling about it, and maybe I'll use this mic a little bit more. This is an Audio Technica, by the way, and I usually use my condenser mics for these videos, but that's besides the point. This video is not going to be super long comparatively to the other videos that I usually post up, about like 10-11 minutes, but this video I'm trying to aim around the 8 or maybe even 9 at max. But this is going to be about Cloak and Dagger season 3. Now for the most part there still isn't very much information out there, but I believe I have found some information that is very suggestive that there probably might be at least another season of Cloak and Dagger, if anything. But before I dive into any details about the TV show or anything like that, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you're thinking, let me know what you're feeling, and without further ado, let's kind of just dive into this. Alright, so season 3 of Cloak and Dagger has been a mystery so far, and season 1 did pretty well for the most part. Season 2, it started off well, then the ratings started to drop and decrease. No matter how much you or I enjoyed it, for the most part the ratings did not stay pretty much as high as they were for season 1. So this is what I want to dive into. I was actually searching some information on the internet, and I discovered actually a Rotten Tomatoes page that actually had season 3 posted, in terms of the page itself was being created, but there was no information on it, because obviously if you go to a Rotten Tomatoes page, it'll tell you the consensus, the ratings that season got, as well as the cast, and some basic information that you get from the Rotten Tomatoes page, but none of that was there. But the season 3 page was there for the most part, meaning either they know something we don't, or someone made this page preemptively hoping that there would be a season 3. Now, this information by itself does not mean that there is going to be a season 3, but I think it's a little odd that they would create a season 3 page without there being any season 3 yet. So I mean, there hasn't been any news released or anything like that, so I would surely hope that at least there's going to be a season 3 at the very least, to wrap up some of these loose ends. Now, this is what I really want to kind of talk about in relation to the information that we got about Cloak and Dagger season 3, in terms of Rotten Tomatoes making a page for it. I'll put that link in the description down below, so that way you can verify the information and I'm not just talking out my ass. But here we go. So we already know there's going to be a crossover with the Runaways when it comes to the Runaways season 3 with Cloak and Dagger for episode or 2. So what I think is going to happen, and I think I discussed this in the other video that I did about Cloak and Dagger and the Runaways, is that they're going to have a crossover episode to see how people feel about them kind of interacting with each other, and seeing how people really feel about Cloak and Dagger in general. Because maybe they're characters that are not supposed to hold a TV show by themselves. They had a couple runs, obviously in comic books and Marvel Comics. They had multiple volumes of comic books, but for the most part, they've never been able to maintain those comics for an extremely long period of time. Has nothing to do with them and their terrible powers or anything like that. It's just sometimes that's how they work out. Some people don't really know how to write characters specifically, and then at some point in the future we might get somebody who knows how to write those characters. It happens, it's very normal. It doesn't just happen with comic books, but it happens in general. Now, I think people are waiting to see, okay, yes, there is still a crowd for this TV show, there's still a crowd for Cloak and Dagger, but let's see how they interact with the Runaways, because like I said, there is a point in time in the comics where the Runaways were actually hired by the Pride to find the kids. So I think they're going to use that approach to kind of, introduce them into the Runaways kind of aspect of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, I am hearing some rumors, some speculation, some speculative information that they might be considering the possibility of combining the two shows into a singular show. And that's mostly because, like I said, Cloak and Dagger would make great support characters for the Runaways. For the most part, the Runaways and Cloak and Dagger are actually close in age when it comes to them being teenagers, and what they do, their purpose, etc. Very similar, and they're very heavily correlated when it comes to their abilities and what they seek to do when it comes to them being superheroes in the comic book landscape. So I think that would be some merit. There's some merit to that, because overall that would not be a completely bad idea. but I think there is some rumor speculation, but for the most part I do not think that's going to happen. And also I think they're supposed to solely move Cloak and Dagger, or there was some talks of Cloak and Dagger being completely moved to Hulu. Like I said, not really sure, because all of this is just speculative information and there's nothing really set in stone about these official moves and these discussions, because some of these things pop up and then they disappear for like several months at a time. But with the Rotten Tomatoes page kind of being up for season 3, I think my first initial assessment was correct for the most part. They're going to wait until the crossover happens. They're going to see how people react to it. They're going to see if people are really excited to it. Or they're going to wait until the TV show of Runaways kind of boosts the ratings for Cloak and Dagger again to kind of get a crowd going. Or some of the people who are watching only the Runaways, they're going to try and get them to convert over to Cloak and Dagger and get them watching both shows, and then basically get those ratings back up, and then hopefully that season 3 will be a lot better, and then the show will continue on into season 4, 5, and 6, and etc. And also they might be crossing over to the Disney Plus, but at the same time I highly doubt that, because I don't think that show has a big enough impact for them to want to even consider moving that onto the Disney Plus streaming service. But like I said, that's mostly just my headcanon, as well as just some speculation and some people who are forming theories out there on the internet. So there's not really too much to say about that. Now, before I decide to wrap up this video, or basically do my sign off, the regular stuff, there is something about Cloak and Dagger that I really hope to see when it comes to season 3. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you would agree with me once I say this. Now, they already did a different version of Despair, where Despair was someone who was actually Shane actually hoping to get access to the power of the Loa. And he did so for a short amount of time, and then Ty and Tandy was able to kind of counteract him, but I don't think he's defeated. But ultimately I do want to see his transformation, with him tapping into the power of the Loa, because if I remember correctly, it was actually Cloak's ex, Evita. She was the one who mentioned that someone accessing the power of the Loa is indeed a very treacherous and dangerous thing to do, because it offsets a lot of the balances that have been set by these supernatural beings. And if you've read any kind of Marvel comics or anything like that, people like the Loa, or Bast and the Egyptian gods, and obviously Thor being a god himself, these gods all exist in Marvel comics. So I want to see the side effects of Despair actually tapping in or accessing that power, and I want to see what they're going to do with his character. I want to see if they're going to make him like an agent, or like someone who works for the Loa due to the fact that he was power hungry, in order just to simply satiate his headaches, which like I said, ultimately is not completely his fault. It was a side effect of the explosion, and then it gave him access indirectly to these abilities and feeding off people's despair. But I want to see if his hunger, or him wanting to access that power for eternal relief, was worth it, and him becoming an agent of the Loa and him becoming the Despair that we've seen in the comic books. Is very much possible, because Despair was a very powerful being. He was a demon who operated within the dimension of Cloak's dimension, the Dark Force. That was basically his home of origin, which is basically what Despair was. He was for the most part residing in Cloak's aspect. He wasn't too much dealing with Tandy and her mental state, because her whole thing is hope. So once she's able to tap into hope, once she's able to reignite that fire, it's a lot harder for him to try and take that away, compared to Ty's abilities, where he can feed off of that, because his powers are totally derived from fear and despair and darker emotions. So I do want to see the side effects of what he would look like once he fully is an agent of the Loa. I would be very interested, as well as I want to see what's going on with Papa Legba, because they did not get in depth about him enough. Yes, he's a trickster, yes, he has multiple forms, and yes, people portray him differently in different cultures, but I still want to know what is the price that Tandy has to pay. Because remember, when she first went into the cloak, she actually made a deal that she was not supposed to use her powers in that dimension, for very obvious reasons. Remember, her powers are very hope based. So she wasn't supposed to use her powers, and then probably about 3 or 5 minutes in, who knows, because like I said, in the Dark Force, time is not relative, she ended up breaking that vow, using her powers and escaping. So ultimately she does have to pay a price. but I want to know what it is. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think about this Cloak and Dagger. The minor information I was able to bring forward to you. Check out the link in the description. There is a page for it on Rotten Tomatoes, and I want you to let me know if you feel like there's a possibility that season 3 is actually coming, or do you feel like they're going to release this information a little after the whole crossover event while the height of the hype is still up. And I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.